back at it. Open up a blank level, hopefully save some performance here too. Okay. Downloads and grab my textures. Okay. And then if you've been following along, so just to go where we've been going from, you have your static mesh here, whatever one you picked, that's up to you. You have a folder with your textures in it, has all of your textures. And then if you've been following along so far, if you go back up to your materials folder, you should have your m_basic surface. And we can right click on that and say create material instance. And in my case, you can see I created this material instance _mi_street lamp because this is the material that it's meant to be applied to. Okay. If you double click on your 3D model, whichever one you picked, it'll open it up in a kind of an inspector viewer like so. And you can see the materials, how many materials your 3D model is expecting. Now, in my case, the street lamp is expecting one for the actual pole, one for the glass, and then one for the light bulb. And what I've been working on is the one for the pole. And you can assign your materials by clicking on these drop downs here and changing them from world grid material. And you just search here for whatever you named your material. So in my case, MI street lamp, I assigned that to the first slot here. And if I double click on this, I can go in here and this is what I have. And you can see that in your textures folder for your 3D model, you should have textures for all of the parameters that we defined for our basic surface, our roughness, our normal, displacement, base color, ambient occlusion. If you don't have any of the textures, it's okay, just skip them, okay? And you might also have a metallic texture. So in my case, my street lamp comes with a metal texture. By default, our material that we created, oh, don't crash on me again, please, thank you. All right, our material that we created does not support metallic textures. So if I go down here to the bottom, I can see my basic surface. This is the template for this material instance, and I double click on this. This is what I added, right? So I just added another texture parameter by copying and pasting one of the existing ones, and added this thing called a static switch parameter, right? And you can see I have this static switch parameter. If it's true, I want to use the metallic texture, and if it's false, I just want to use my flat metallic parameter. And you can see here, I have that switch here. So I can switch between using a texture or just using the flat metallic. As you can see, I no longer see my metallic scalar parameter. And if I set this to false, it comes back, but I no longer have a texture, right? So we are switching feature sets. Now, if I go back to my street lamp here, you can see that this pole looks like a kind of dark gray metal pole. But you can see that the glass here looks like this crappy gray grid material. So we need to create a material for our glass. Now this is difficult using our kind of basic material like this, because our basic surface, I'm just going to go here for a second. I'm going to select my basic surface, the output node here. If I go to the left and I look at my blend mode, you can see it's set to opaque, right? And opaque just means that light does not go through it. It's not glass, it's not water. This is a completely opaque surface. No light's going to pass through. We can override this, like we can go onto our material instance. I'll just open up my street lamp instance here. scroll down and you can see in the general tab, I can override it here if I want. I can go from blend mode to opaque to, in my case, it'll probably be masked, right? Because glass absorbs some light, but not all of it. Or sorry, it'll be translucent. I don't like doing this in general because now if I do this, all of my kind of basic surfaces that are opaque now have a whole bunch of settings for opacity. I could add a static switch to say, is material translucent? And then add all of that on one side of a static switch. Or I can just say, well, let's just have two parent materials in our case, right? Let's have one parent material for all of our kind of translucent glass materials, and we'll have another parent material for our opaque. So I'm just going to go to my materials folder, to my m_basic surface. I'll hit Control C, Control V. And I'm going to name this M. Oh, no, let me rename it. m_basic surface _ translucent. Right, translucent. So I've just kind of said, all right, there's going to be a lot of overlap between kind of my basic simple surface and then my surface that I can see through, but there's going to be enough differences that I just don't want them overlapping too much, right? There's no right or wrong answer on kind of when you would use a switch versus when you create a whole new material, but this is just something I've found helpful to keep myself organized. Now, if I double click and open up my new master material here, you can see by default opacity and opacity mask. These are the parameters that let us see through stuff are grayed out. They don't do anything. To blend mode. Right now it's set to opaque. I'm going to set it to translucent, right? So some light is going to pass through it, but not all light. And you can see we've kind of created another set of problems. Now our metallic, specular, and roughness and normal are no longer doing anything. If I scroll down my details panel, I should find under the translucency tab. So this is the tab that controls all of the settings for translucent glass-like materials. We have this thing called a lighting mode. And by default, it's set to volumetric non-directional. You don't have to worry about all of the kind of technical terms, because if you hover over it, it'll tell you what it does. And it says that this lighting mode is used typically for smoke and dust. So the question is glass smoke or dust? No, obviously not, right? We can click this dropdown and we can kind of just go through and see if there's one that's going to work for glass. If I come down to surface translucency volume or surface forward shading, either of these will work for glass. I'm going to pick this surface translucency volume to start, just because it's a little bit cheaper, is the simple answer. Is it's easy, like your computer will be taxed a little less by this version. And you can see we get all of our basic input parameters back, and we also now have this opacity input here. So for my opacity input, I'm going to do the same thing I did with my metallic. Right? We have a translucent material, which means, again, some light can pass through, but not all light. We may have a texture that tells us what parts we can see through and what parts we can't, or we might not. So I can right-click, and I can say static switch parameter, and I'll call this one use opacity map. I can just grab these two nodes from my metallic texture, copy and paste, and rename it to opacity texture. And if I don't have an opacity texture, I just want a flat parameter like this, I can hold down the S key and click to create a scalar parameter, and I'll call this opacity. And I'll default value, I don't know, 0.5. Doesn't really matter. You can set the default value to whatever you want. Hello. And I'll plug that into my opacity. And if I hit apply and save, you'll see that we can actually kind of see through our material now, like so. Right? Pretty cool. Okay, so now we need to create for our street lamp a material for our street lamp's glass, right? We've just created this master material for translucent surfaces. And we can do what we do, or do what we've done for all of our other basic surfaces. We can right click and create a material instance and call it MI street lamp glass. Move it into our folder there. Okay. Now, if I open this up, in my case, yes, I want to use an opacity map. And I want to assign all of these textures. Okay. So I can go back to my textures folder or my street lamp. So here's all of the textures I imported for my 3D model. And we have this one here. Looks like we have an opacity map right there. So I'm going to go and click and drag and assign this to the opacity. I'll do the same thing with my roughness, my normal, my displacement, my base color, and my ambient occlusion, like so. Now, we could also use our metal map here, but it's safe to assume that glass is not made of metal, so we can just leave a flat value, and that saves us from having to load another texture into memory. We can go to our metallic value, set it to 0. Okay. Now if I go back to my street lamp here, right, so I've gone back here, I have my street lamp kind of body material here. You can see we have a slot for our glass. Street lamp glass right here. And you can see now we have this kind of frosted glass material like so. Okay. How much time do we have left? Do I have time? 11, 11:50, 12:20. Okay. We're going to do the light bulb next, because in my opinion, that's kind of one of the more fun aspects of materials. And then we can go back and add something called refraction to our glass, which is the way we bend light through a translucent material to kind of like, you know, like when you're looking through water and you see the sand underneath at the beach and the sand kind of like bends and warbles. We can do that here with our glass as well. Okay. So in our case, our light bulb, we want it to glow. We want it to emit light, right? So in our case, if we look at our basic surface, I've just opened this up, we have this toggle here for our emissive color. We can just expand our basic surface a little bit to include this, or we could create kind of a separate material that's a little bit lighter weight, that doesn't have all of this textures and stuff assigned to it. That's just going to perform a little better because it doesn't need to do as much math or load as much files into memory. That all it's going to do is going to glow. So we're going to try creating a new simple material. So I'm just going to go to my materials folder. I'm going to right click, create a new material, and I'll call this M underscore surface underscore emissive. Emissive just meaning it emits light, it glows. And if I open this up, we have this thing here for our emissive color. Now, this is where we can look over here again in our blend modes, we could change this to a masked or a translucent blend mode. But we also have this option here for our shading model, right? The default lit shading model means that the purpose of this shader is to get hit by light and display a surface that's hit by light. But we also have this unlit. And if we change it to unlit, the only input parameter is our emissive color, right? And basically what this means is this isn't meant to get hit by light. It's meant to emit light. It's not being lit by other things. It is lighting other things. And so that's what this material is going to do. Now, if I just hold down the 3 key to create a vector constant for our colors, I'll set this to like a red color just to show it as an example. I'll plug that into the emissive color. And it'll take a second to prepare, and you can see now it is like this flat emissive red color. But this doesn't look like a light bulb, right? Light bulbs kind of glow. They have kind of an aura around them. So I could take my constant here. I'm just going to take my red value, and instead of having it be set to 1, I'm going to set it to 1,000 and apply. And now you can see it's starting to glow. This is the way I like doing it least. I just wanted to do this to demonstrate that values greater than 1 will cause the material to emit light. But what happens if we want to just have our color set in one sense? If we want to be able to kind of control the color and the glow separately, so I have 2 parameters for that. What we can do is I'm going to right click and convert this to a parameter, and I'll call this emissive color. You could also just call it color. It's kind of understood to be emissive because that's the surface we're creating. I can hold down the M key and click to multiply, or you can right click and search for multiply and add it that way. All right, if we want to take all of these values here, we want it to be this color and just glow this color. And so if we want to change this from 1 to 1,000, this from 0.07 to 774, and maintain this at 0, how would we do that? We'd multiply it, right? Because when you multiply a vector, all 3, like the X, Y, Z, or RGB channels in this case, will all get multiplied equally. I can hold down the S key and click to create another scalar parameter, and we can call this glow intensity. And by default, I'll just have it set to 1. I'll plug that into the emissive color. Okay. I'm just going to close this down. I don't need my street lamp glass. I don't need my street lamp open. Don't need my basic surface. I'm back here to my street lamp. I'm going to find my emissive surface master material here. Right click, create a material instance. And I'll call this mi underscore street lamp underscore bulb, right? Because that's what it is. I'll just move it into my street lamp folder here. Okay. Now, if I go in here, I'm just going to, you can see I have my glow intensity and my glow color. This kind of bright red is not really what light bulbs look like, right? It's a bad color for a light bulb. As somebody who recently redid the lighting in my house, I have thought very deeply about the color of light bulbs recently. And so I know they tend to be kind of a warm yellow or orange, like so. And this is typically like a 2800 Kelvin bulb, or they could also be kind of a paler white blue if you're getting like a 5000 or a 6000 Kelvin bulb. But very rarely are they kind of very bright colors like this. So they tend to be closer to white, and then you just kind of nudge them in the direction of the color you want. And that looks like a good light bulb color there. And then for our glow intensity, I don't know, I'll set this like 5000. Now that's starting to look like a light bulb, right? I can go back to my street lamp model here. And for our final material, for this world grid material, I select this drop down. I go MI, street lamp. We have our bulb. And now we have a glowing bulb in our street lamp, right? The point of this is not for you to have to know how to create every single material under the sun, right? The point is when you import a model, you kind of work through the simplest problems first. Okay, the simple opaque surface, we know how to make that. We've done that before. We make that material. If your thing then has glass, you kind of just ask yourself, okay, well, how do I create a glass material? I know how to do it because I've done it before, but if you've never done it before, how do you figure it out? Google, YouTube, you say, how do I create a glass material? And if you get hung up on any of these things, you message me, you come to a review session, you say, hey, I've got my glass and I've got my street lamp, but I don't know how to do a light bulb material. Then I'll help you figure that out, right? Okay, we're going to do one last thing to kind of polish this a little bit more. And that is when we look at glass, for the most part, with the exception of very clear glass, like if you look at the glass at the back of the room, it's very clear. There's not a lot of refraction. But if you look through something like water or stained glass, textured glass, it bends things, right? The things that you see through it get warped. That's what we're going to do for this glass here. We're going to add something called refraction, if this ever gets around to saving. There we go, 100%. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my translucent material here. Go to my materials, open up my translucent material. You can see we have an input for refraction down here at the bottom, but it is disabled. And that's because if we come down to the bottom here, we should have a tab for refraction somewhere. You can also just go into the search bar and search refraction. It takes us to this tab here, and the refraction method right now is set to none, so it does not refract any light. I can click on this, and there's two options I use. I've never really used 2D offset, so I'm not sure how to use it. I think that's more for like user interface stuff, but I'm not sure. We have index of refraction and pixel normal offset. Index of refraction is the easiest to use because it's just like a physical value, right? I believe the index of refraction of air is a value of 1, which means it doesn't really refract air or refract light much at all. Like if I look at somebody in this room, you're not kind of bending and warbling because I'm looking at you through air. But if there was a pane of glass or a bunch of water coming down between us, it would refract it, right? It would be a refraction index greater than 1. So I'm just going to turn this into a parameter. I'm going to hold down the S key and click. And I can name this index of refraction. I can right click. And I don't need to. It's already a parameter. Never mind. And for my default value, I'm going to set this to be a value of 1.0. And with my parameter selected, I'm also going to set the slider minimum to 1.0 as well, and maybe the slider maximum to 2 or 3, maybe 3. And the reason I'm doing this is just because you can't really have an index of refraction below 1, like values less than 1 don't make sense and you'll get really weird results. So I just set it so the minimum is 1. And values greater than 3 or 4 also give you just really crazy weird results that you don't need to worry about. So we're going to set that maximum to 3. And it'll take a second to compile. because refraction is very costly. If you have a refracting material, your GPU is not going to be happy. It is going to chug. And it'll just compile and compile and compile. I realize I'm not sharing my screen anymore. Okay. I'm going to close both of these down and open up my glass material here. Okay. So I want this to refract. So I'm going to take my index of refraction. Right now it's set to 1, so it's not refracting at all. I'm just going to set it to like 1.3. And by default, if you've set your rendering settings to be low, your engine scalability settings to low, you're not going to see anything change. So if you want to see refraction, you have to go to settings, engine scalability settings here, and make sure it's set to high. Okay. So I'll set that to high. Now, if I go to my street lamp, and I look at my bulb through the glass, you can see the bulb as I move is kind of getting bent and moved off of the center of the thing. But if I open up I'm going to have my glass material open on one side and my 3D model open on the other side so I can view both. Right? You can see right now I'm seeing a double image because of the refraction. If I take this index of refraction down to 1, you can see it's refracting a little bit, bending a little bit like so. You can see how it just bends and alters the light. But if I set it to a crazy high value, this is nonsense, right? This just makes no logical sense whatsoever. Right? Value of like maybe 1.1, so like 10% more refractive than air. It's probably going to give me a pretty good result. Doesn't need to be a whole lot, just needs to kind of sell the idea of glass. Okay. So with that, I would recommend everybody take 20 minutes, go on to Polyhaven, pick out a couple of 3D models you like, download them, and just quickly as you can, just create a couple materials for them, right? I'll go through the process for a really simple one now. Okay, here's a good one here, this axe. I'll bring in this axe. This is a good example because it has both metal here as well as wood. We go here to zip, we make sure we're grabbing all of our textures and our FBX. And we make sure that the setting is 1K, and we download that. Okay. And I can open this up, right click, extract all. And we end up with a folder like this, right? With our FBX and our textures. And close these down because I've assigned all my materials. I'm happy with them. I'm going to go to my static meshes. I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to call this axe, right? Because that's where all my axe related stuff is going to go. And then I can click and drag my FBX into my level here, right? In my case, it's all one mesh, so I'm going to combine these meshes. And I don't want to create materials, right? Because we've already created materials. I don't want to have to create more. I'm going to import that. You may get an error like this, like smoothing group information, ignore it. Unless it actually like crashes your editor or your 3D model doesn't show up, just ignore the error messages. Okay. Now we've got our Axe 3D model, and if I double click and open it up, you can see it only requires this one material. And so the real question is, can I see through my axe? No, it's opaque. So I can go to my materials, grab my basic surface, create a material instance, call it mi_axe, and move it into my axe folder. Now I need to import my textures. So I go back to my Axe folder, I have this textures folder. I just click and drag the whole thing, grab all of my textures and drag them in. There's my textures. Open up my Axe material instance and just set all of our texture parameters, right? I can kind of minimize it like so I can see my textures here and my textures here and just click and drag. Got my ambient occlusion, got my base color, got my normal, got my roughness. It looks like in our case, we don't have a displacement texture, so we can actually just ignore that. That would actually be a good candidate to put a static switch. Are we using a displacement texture or not? That's something you can do on your own if you're so interested. As you can see, we also have a metal texture. So we want to use our metallic map and click and drag. Now, if I go back to my Axe 3D model, go to this material and select the material out of the dropdown, my Axe. There we go. I see one issue here where I can see it's kind of splitting here. I think that's because I'm displacing it right now. I'm going to go to my displacement multiplier and just set it to 0. If I do that, there we go. Now we have our Axe, right? If you just do the initial legwork of getting your materials set up, you can import your 2 3D models. How long did that take me? 2 minutes? Obviously, I've done it before. It might take you 5 minutes. You only have to import 2 for your final assignment, right? If you just review the lectures on creating your basic surface material, you can do 2/3 of your final assignment in, I don't know, 20 minutes. You can just get it done. And for the more complicated stuff, like I kind of picked one of the most complicated 3D models I could find with this street lamp. Just pick 2 simple ones, and if you want to try and tackle the complicated one, because you think it's fun, because you're interested, great. I picked a complicated one to go through it. You're like, you picked a complicated one. That sucks. Let's sort it out. It's doable, right? Let's do another one. See, I have 10 minutes. Let's see how many I can do in 10 minutes. Here's a good example, these brass candle holders right here. Okay. If I look at this, these look kind of fun. I'm going to click download. All of my download settings have already been set. I already set them the first time. Open it up, right click, and extract all. Okay. Interesting. This one doesn't seem to have textures associated with it. Ah, interesting. O1 and O2. It looks like this one has a whole lot of textures, so I'm just going to download all of these textures. All right, there's a mistake I made. I downloaded it, but I didn't make sure I downloaded all the textures. I'll download it. I'll take a second. And I can right click, extract all. I can create a new folder, candle holders. Now, I saw that this one has 3 candle holders in it, but I only have 1 3D model file. So if I click and drag this, what was the one setting that we needed to use our discretion and think about? Combine meshes. There's 3 separate meshes in here, but only 1 folder. In this case, I don't want to combine my meshes. I want 3 separate candle holders, right? Import all. There we go. There are 3 candle holders. For my brass candle holders, I grab my textures. I import my textures. It'll take a hot minute. This one actually looks kind of cool. It looks like it has like a flame texture associated with it. I didn't know they had that. I might actually keep that. Okay, go to our materials, grab our basic surface, create material instance. I'll call this mi candle holder 1, right? Because we have 3 different candle holders. And we have candle holder 1, candle holder 2, candle holder 3. If I open up my candle holder, see it has 2 materials. I'm going to guess we have 1 material for the actual like handle part and the brass holder. And we have another material for the fire. Let's see if we can do this. And open up my mi candle holder 1. Go to my textures. Enable all my textures. I'm going to wager that we have a metal map here too. Grab my metal, put it in my metallic texture. Grab my diffuse, put it in my base color. Grab my AO. Grab my normal. Grab my roughness. Just click and drag. Fill in the slots that we have already created. I'm happy with that. I go to here. Candle holder 1. And it might just take a second. It looks like I assigned that. Looks like this one's reversed. The flame is the first one. Slot here. So I can go mi candle holder 1. Looks like it's still kind of being pushed out and displaced. I'll just set that to 0. There we go. Beautiful candle holder, right? That took me 3 minutes. If it takes you 10 minutes, you have a month to do it. The only issue here is that the flame, it looks like a little candle holder right now. So I'm going to fix this, right? So the flame is actually kind of interesting because we have this diffuse texture here. So I can go to my emissive. Like the flame is kind of similar to our light bulb, right? If I go in here and open up my emissive, right? Right now we're assuming it's opaque. We shouldn't assume this. It's actually masked in this case. So I just went in and I changed it from opaque to masked, and it has this thing here called an opacity mask. Actually, it might even be translucent. I can just set the opacity here. I'm going to open up that flame texture and just see what kind of data it's giving me. Because that's actually kind of fun. I've never gotten a texture like this from textures.com. If I open this up, you can see I can isolate. It has 4 channels, R, G, B, and A. So it has the color, and then it has a transparency encoded into the alpha, right? If I turn off the A value, we lose our transparency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my texture here, like so. I'll convert this to a parameter. I might change this to something like sprite texture. We know that our alpha, or A here, is our opacity. And we know that our RGB is our emissive color, which we can multiply and do this. I would probably add a static switch here to have the choice between using a texture static switch parameter, use sprite texture. True and false, and do something like so convert to parameter opacity. And copy and paste this. True if we're using the texture information, false if we're just using a flat value, like so. Now I can go in and create another material instance from my emissive one. I can right click, call this mi candle flame. Move it into my candle holders. Open up my candle holder, or my candle flame rather. In my case, I want to use the texture. So now I have this flame texture in here. I'm going to increase the glow intensity to something like 9 as a good guess. I don't know if that's the right value. And then I can go back into my candle holder and replace this with my candle flame. That doesn't look too bad, right? I'd actually say that looks pretty darn good. I might have one small issue where the candle flame doesn't actually kind of rotate to face me, whatever direction I'm coming at it from. Like if I look at it from this direction, it seems really thin. And it's also not two-sided, right? Candle, you'd see the flame from both sides. It's not like it's invisible from one side and visible from the other. So I can go to my emissive material. What do you know? We have a two-sided toggle right here. I'll just set that to true. So now we can see our material from both sides. Let's see if that helps. Take a second to load. There we go. Now I can see it no matter what angle I'm looking at it from. Right. 4 minutes. What else can I do to improve this candle flame here? World position offset. Looks like we get that. I don't know that our candle flame actually has enough resolution to do any kind of like waving or warbling. Let's see. Wireframe. Okay, it's got some resolution. We'll see. We'll see. Go back to my emissive. I don't know. I'd have to think about how to do that. Probably sign, add it to the world position. X, Y, Z. Let's see what goes on here. Okay, not quite what I'm looking for, but close enough. I would need to do a little bit more. X, Y. Make float 3. So I only move it. End vector. I don't want it to move up and down. I only want it to move side to side. And getting better, but the bottom line is you can kind of, once you have it basically set up, you can kind of go in and try and spend more time on effects if you really care to. Okay. I'm thrilled with that. So I'm going to delete it. Okay, with that, we've only have 2 minutes left. I don't have a whole lot of time to create more materials, but I hope at the end of this, you've gotten the idea of how to go through the process, debug, figure out problems. You can choose simpler things than this. You can just choose the ones that have one material. That's fine.